Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Bronfman Fellowship information call for this year's application period. We are so happy that you can make it tonight. Some of us on this call are in various time zones, and I imagine some of you are as well. And we are really happy. This is a program that recruits from students from all across North America, so the US and Canada. And so we're just really eager to hear your questions tonight and connect. Moving to the next slide, I'll just give you a quick housekeeping and then I'll introduce myself some more as well as the other people on the call tonight. We ask that you do mute yourself if you're not speaking. You're always at any point welcome to use the chat feature to ask any questions. We are recording the call and we will post this call or maybe one of the other info calls we do online. And if you are in a place where you can, we do love seeing friendly faces. So you're welcome to keep your camera on if that feels comfortable for you. So on the next slide, you'll just get a chance to see just a moment of where we're sitting as an organization. We are a program that is comprised of over 1,400 Israelis and North Americans. Our program has been around since 1987, and we have over 500 Israeli fellows in our community, and as well as staff. This is a really difficult moment in Jewish history and challenging time, and so it sometimes can feel difficult to move forward and talk about also planning ahead and thinking about what it means to be doing an experience like the Bronfman Fellowship. And yet, as we're holding our Israeli community close, we also really believe that one of the most important things that all of us can be doing right now is moving towards how to have a vibrant Jewish future and how to continue doing that. And so this recruitment call is also a testament to Jewish resilience. And so we're really glad that you are joining us and holding these mixed emotions, which we also are. So you've heard my voice. I'll say a little bit about myself as well. I'm the CEO of the fellowship. My name is Becky Vorwinda. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm also an alumna of the program. I went on the program in 1997. And it's really just a true pleasure to work for this organization, one that really believes in pluralism at its center and also believes in the power of young people. I'm really pleased tonight to be joined by Ariel Rivera Corman. Ariel is our community manager. Ariel, if you want to just say hello and introduce yourself a moment.
Hi, everyone. So good to see you here. Like Becky said, I'm Ariel Corman. I am the community manager and rabbinic fellow this year. I'm a student at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And I had such an incredible time with Josh and Miriam and all the other fellows this summer. And it was my responsibility, shared with the rest of the fellows and staff and faculty, to really create a warm and inclusive and challenging community together. So happy that all of you are interested in something just like that.
Thank you. And so we have two of our fellows that are currently in the midst of their fellowship year right now who are in 12th grade. One of them is Miriam, the other is Josh. Miriam, do you want to introduce yourself a moment? Maybe just tell us one thing about the program that you're glad you've been a part of thus far.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Miriam. I'm from Chicago, and at the end of, the fellowship summer, I think one of the things I'm holding closest, especially now, is the community that developed between people my age, So now I have relationships with people all over the country to, to call, to visit, and all of that stuff. And I think the community that developed was really like something that I was looking for and very conversation based and relationships that started this summer I've carried on throughout the rest of the year.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm from Houston. The thing about Bronfman that I think in the past 3 weeks has been most evident to me has been the relationships I made with the Israeli Ami team. So the Bronfman, there's 26 North American fellows, and then there's 20 Israeli Ami team, which is like I guess the equivalent program, but in Israel. And we spent, I think, 4 or 5 days with them, and we got to meet them and talk about the differences between North American Jewry and Israeli Jewry and responsibilities and all of that. In the past couple weeks, those have been the people I've been reaching out to. And they've also been reaching out to me, and they've wanted to find out about my life and what the American Jewish experience is during these difficult times. So those relationships have been really important to me recently.
Thank you. And we're also joined by Erica Goldman, who is our Deputy CEO, but tonight who's serving in a role of Zoom Ninja. And thank you, Erica, for your help and for all the work you do. So we want to give you a little sense of what to expect over the next hour together, or a little less than an hour at this point. We will do our best to share a bit about the program, about its mission, its purpose, some examples of what the fellowship feels like, looks like, what you'll learn, what it feels like to be in community. And Miriam and Ariel and Josh are going to do a lot of that work and sharing stories and examples. We will talk a bit about the application process and try and share a few tips there. And then we will reserve around 20 minutes for question and answer. So at any point, you're very welcome to put a question into the chat, and we'll start to open up for questions and respond to them as the session continues. So what is a Bronfman Fellow, or who is a Bronfman Fellow? The Bronfman Fellowship really believes in identifying young people who have the potential and who already are the kinds of individuals who are community builders and deep thinkers and moral voices and cultural creators. We're really looking for individuals who are intellectually curious, really have a passion to learn for the sake of learning, are on a Jewish journey and interested in exploring and talking about their Jewish identity, but most significantly are also people in the sense that they want to be in community with other young people who have a wide range of ways of identifying and expressing their Jewishness. And that kind of combination of the heady intellectual, but also someone who really cares about people and community is the sorts of folks that we're looking for when we're building a community and cohort. So on the next slide, this just gives you a taste of the community. And I was hoping that Josh and Miriam might join and share a sentence or two about, what were some of the kinds of people they encountered through their cohort. Again, it could also be the AMI team, the Israeli fellows, or the North American fellows, maybe like a little snapshot, perhaps. Who were your roommates, or what was an identity that you didn't know that well that you got to know better through the relationships you formed? Miriam, do you want to go first? I won't make you go first all the time, but I'll let you go first this time.
Okay. So I guess maybe the easiest way to do this is to, think about who my roommates were, except for the fact that a couple of my roommates, happened to be from New York. But I'll say over the course of the summer, I had different roommates at various points. But I think it was really interesting. My roommates for the bulk of the time, they were both from Brooklyn, New York, but one of them went to Jewish school and grew up in the Chabad community, but ended up leaving it. And one of them goes to, like a Quaker school and finds her Judaism at home with her dad and, observing Shabbos and things like that. And I come from a Jewish community that, encourages exploration in Judaism, however that means for you. So to hear from them how they experience their Judaism and how they practice in their own individual ways, I think was really eye-opening to me and inspiring, honestly.
Thinking about, just trying to think about the diversity, religiously, the way I like to think about it, and the way is like, on one end, I had like one friend who never said the Shema before, and who I sat with on a dark at 1 a.m. in the middle of the night as we overlooked like a valley, and I taught him the Shema, and it was a really spiritual moment. On the other end, you have kids like me, or kids who know how to read the Torah and know the Torah trope, and kids that have gone to modern Orthodox day schools. So kind of that broad spectrum of religious background from maybe only knowing or only experiencing Judaism in the home and being the only Jew at a massive public school. One of my friends was from rural South Carolina, and the only Jew in the school. So a real wide diversity of religious background, and I guess Jewish knowledge.
Thank you so much. One of the things that both of you also noted is the diversity of ways that people practice Jewishly and Jewish expression. And Ariel, maybe you could share as well something around the ways that you've observed the fellowship working to try and make sure that students who come from strong backgrounds where they are engaged in Jewish law and halachic practice feel that this is a space that they can be observant in the way that they're used to, but also the way that this can be a space, as Josh was noting, for students who this may be one of the first times they've ever been in a Jewish group.
So it's baked into Bronfman, this idea of pluralism, and the idea of pluralism as a project that we actually have to work for. So understanding it's not enough just to say we're going to bring together a group of people and they're going to come from different backgrounds, but to actually work through, well, what does it look like to live together? Bronfman specifically is committed to creating a Shabbat environment that is conducive to traditional observance for those fellows who come in with that background, and we can say more about it. And I'm personally someone with a little bit of experience in lots of different parts of the Jewish world. I grew up more secular. I am and now in conservative rabbinical school, and I have Orthodox family in Israel. And what I really saw was an effort on behalf of the fellows and staff and faculty to really show, well, what is each individual person bringing? What's special? It's not just how much do you know, how little do you know, but even more, well, what do you know? And I have a really wonderful image of us all sitting around. There actually was supposed to be a fire, but then we didn't end up lighting the campfire, but we were all sitting around in a circle singing. And it was a combination of traditional Jewish prayers and pop songs and really whatever it was that that moved the fellows in that moment. And that really sticks out to me as an image of what I think Bronfman does well.
Thank you. And we'll get into a little more detail as we continue around ways that the fellowship tries to work to really bring together a wide spectrum of Jewish identity and make a space that is both challenging, but also allows for people to come in and be their full selves. So on the next slide, this is just like a small taste of our 1,400 plus alumni, but I did want to say one more sentence about the way that our hope is that fellows will be the kinds of individuals who have a wide range of interests and talents. This is not a fellowship that is exclusively aimed at one kind of career path or one way of leading or making a difference. We're really proud of the ways that our alumni grow through Bronfman to have an articulate and passionate Jewish identity and a passion for engaging with other Jews, but then bring that into so many different spheres professionally and personally. And that is really the ripple effect that we see in the program. So on the next slide, this is just a quick snapshot of the fellowship dates here. Our summer seminar, which at this juncture, Josh and Miriam have experienced, they have not yet experienced winter and spring, but our summer seminar begins typically with around 10 days in North America, where we meet with figures and engage in learning here in North America first. We have some time also in a more rural retreat space that allows us to develop as a group. And then we travel together to Israel. And in Israel, the group is based in Jerusalem, but then also has the opportunity to do not a ton of travel, but some exposure and exploration of Israel, as well as time with our Israeli fellows. In the winter and spring, we have seminars in North America. One of those seminars is with our Israeli fellows who come to the US for 2 weeks as well. And so this coming summer, we are still planning and working towards, God willing, the opportunity to spend significant time in Israel in a safe and calm environment. And we are also working on contingency planning. In 2021, as a program, when it was COVID, we were unable to travel to Israel at that time, and we did run our fellowship experience for North Americans in the summer. We ran it in a retreat environment in North America. And then we still were able to bring our Israeli and our American fellows together later in 12th grade. And that is also a possibility that we would explore if safety were a concern. It's genuinely too early to say right now, but we are committed to running the program and it being an in-person program this year. So now we're going to get into some of the fun stuff, highlights from the fellowship, and I'm going to once again turn to our wonderful guests here to give us more of a taste of things. So Josh, I would, and by the way, this is not rehearsed. So Josh, Miriam, and Ariel are doing, off the cuff, they're getting interviewed again, which is one of the things we do at Bronfman, which is many interview processes. But Josh, maybe you could tell us about what you would say is kind of the typical atmosphere for Jewish learning that you experienced in Bronfman. What did Jewish learning feel like or look like? And since in your case you do go to a Jewish day school, if there's any distinctions from what you experience in other typical Jewish learning settings.
Yeah, I think because it's a like Jewish day school, I go to Jewish day school and then I go home. And it's a very like formal, you sit in our Jewish studies class every day, and that's where you get your Judaism. But Bronfman, you have certain points in the day which are the formal times of Jewish learning. For example, some of the days during the summer seminar, we had what was known as shiur, which is a lesson time when we got to spend some time with multiple different faculty members, which we got rotated through, and they taught us a particular topic related to Jewish thought or Jewish, some type of Jewish topic that kind of was their expertise in. So that was a formal setting of learning Judaism. And then there were the moments of like the informality. So like, I pray every morning, and other people, some of the other fellows would come and ask you what I'm doing when I'm praying, when I'm wrapping the phylacteries, the tefillin on me, or watching, another fellow go into the nature and pray, and asking, well, how do you connect with your spirituality? What does that look like for you? So that's, I think, kind of the difference in both the formal and the informal. I also think there's an aspect of like pushing outside of the broader my prior set understandings of what Jewish learning was. So like we met with leaders of different Jewish movements. So we met with the leader of the Reconstructionist movement, based in Philadelphia, and that pushed my understanding of Judaism. We met with a big leader in the kind of the straight Haredi Orthodox world, at the Ner Israel Yeshiva of Baltimore, pushed my understanding of Judaism in a different direction. So not only are we, learning from a diverse faculty, but also in kind of meeting new different types of people that are outside of the official fellowship staff and fellows. That is also a way of learning.
Thank you. Miriam, is there any shiur, any of the classes, whether it was one of the morning shiur classes or one of the special Beit Midrash, special learning sessions that we did, that stands out to you that you could describe a little bit for people as well?
Yeah, for sure. So actually my very first shiur that I took was still in New York. We hadn't even gone to our retreat center yet, but we got right into it. And it was a shiur about anger in Jewish thought. And I think that, like, if I'm being completely honest, that's something that I've explored growing up in Judaism, like exploring anger within Jewish texts and not understanding why it's there. And feeling even like as even when I was much younger, like, being confused at this anger. And so with Michael Rosenberg, one of our faculty members, I was in this room with these other fellows that I had met for the first time, like the day before. And here we are turning and talking to each other and looking at texts, wide range, like you would be surprised at how much anger is in Jewish texts. And it was just a really, really important open space to kind of get to know each other, but also get to know the text and get to know, what this summer might look like. And I think being in that shiur really, was a very strong way to start. And I felt really connected to the people in that shiur and what I learned.
Thank you. And Ariel, one of the things that both Miriam and Josh mentioned a little bit is the faculty. And the Bronfman Fellowship not only builds a cohort of fellows, but also builds a group of educators who work with us, who reflect a wide spectrum of Jewish identities, who accompany the fellows in their experience. And I would love for you to just say a little bit more about what the faculty model kind of looks like on the ground, especially what you were able to observe of how fellows had access to faculty.
Yeah. So this was actually my very first Bronfman summer. I've been a bit of a Bronfman groupie for many years, working with Becky and also working in the Jewish world amongst so many Bronfman alumni. And when I started working at Bronfman, I don't even know, Josh and Miriam, if you know this, but during our first retreat as staff and faculty, a lot of what we did looks a lot like what the fellows ended up doing throughout the summer. We did text study together. We got to know each other. We ended up sharing quite deeply because we knew we would be together for a pretty intensive experience. So there's also a mirroring that happens. We're all kind of in the same experience together. The staff and faculty represented a really wide range of religious practice, philosophical orientation, political orientation. And I think it's a really special environment where fellows have a lot of access to staff and faculty, including rabbis and professors, people who, in regular life, for whatever reason, might just not be as available. And so in the in-between time on the buses, that was when, so many of the, I think, best and most challenging conversations happened. And really every time we as staff and faculty got to engage with a fellow in that way, that was just the highlight of our days.
Thank you. So one other question for Miriam and Josh, and then we'll move on to another slide. But obviously, we've just spent a fair bit of time talking about the kind of learning, the kind of community that includes educators as well. Maybe you could each share an example of just something fun or funny from the fellowship. I mean, I guess what's really important for everyone on here to know is that we really value and respect that this is your summer and that this is a time to have fun, enjoy, make friends. That's really central to what actually sticks with the fellowship. So lest people be worried that this is some sort of academic boot camp, which it isn't, maybe you could say a little bit more about the fun parts too. And the learning is fun, of course.
I can start quickly. I hope I don't get in trouble for telling this story, but I think one of the things that sticks out to me is the area that we stay on when we're in Israel. We call it the Chava. It's like where a lot of Jewish groups can have like retreat centers and stay there. One night I was on a walk with two other fellows, and we were just, that's a very, very Bronfman-y thing. We would go on walks with each other and just, talk for hours and hours. And we came across a shopping cart, and somehow we ended up, taking turns getting pushed around in the shopping cart. And I'm sure there were intellectual conversations interspersed with the running around in the shopping carts, but that was really just a fun connecting time. And even once we got home and I started reflecting, and I was talking with the people that I was on this walk with, we were like, how did that happen? Like this random, seizing the opportunities you see around us. And it's something that I definitely think back on and laugh about first of all, how did we get there, and second of all, why was it such a formative memory for me?
I'll go next. I also don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this, but on our last night, it was like a lot of fun. They took us to the Jerusalem Music Festival where we saw Netta play live, and there were not that many people there, so we were like right on the stage, and she was singing Toy, and everybody was moshing. It was a lot of fun. Then after that, that wasn't the real music festival of the night, because we planned a 3 to 4 a.m. a dance in our little house thing that we called the Matzah Ball, and we got invitations, and we printed out invitations, and we got special food, and then we went out and bought energy drinks, and everybody had to take an energy drink to enter the Matzah Ball, and then we played. It was karaoke. And then the attire was Babylonian chic. So everybody dressed up in togas. So I pulled up a picture of our togas. And we sang and we danced through the night. It was a core memory.
I think we have to do these more so that we get all the fun goss of what's been happening in Brompton that we didn't know about. No, but I think, there is something very creative and playful about the kinds of people that end up as Brompton Fellows. And there's an energy that people build off each other. And, these are like great fun stories that really kind of reflect that. So as we move to the next slide, we have covered a bit of this, and I'm not going to get into the depth and details, but I do want to put like one more fine point on the way that we approach Jewish learning and the way that we build the curriculum. We really try and build an experience that's reflective of the kinds of things that are on your minds at this point in your life. We really realize that this is a program that's taking place at a juncture right before you're making many important decisions in your life around leaving home, moving on to college, and other choices that you may be making. And so the questions that kind of are at the center of the program are questions that are alive for you. And every year we really build the curriculum with the faculty team, with what's happening in the world also on our mind. And so it's really a responsive program in that sense. On the next slide, you'll see just a sample of some of our guest speakers. And Josh referenced 2 examples of speakers that stood out for him. Every year, we really work to build a diverse group of guest speakers who can come meet with the fellows. And what we do with speakers is slightly different, I think, than some experiences might be. Some of these people might even speak in other spaces to young people. But what we ask of our speakers is for them both to share a perspective or point of view, and then to leave a lot of room for question and answer, not in the sense of just their opinion being sort of poured into the fellows' minds, but rather to have a dialogue, to be able to have a space to engage with these speakers in a very personal and intimate way. So, again, not sure, but Miriam, if you have any example also of a speaker that kind of stood out for you, or that you thought would be worth sharing, feel free.
Yeah, so I think an interesting speaker that I remember, for some, I'm blanking on her name, but she was a translator of, books. And so it was really, really cool to hear from her about her her job. And oh yeah, or what, I don't know if it was Ayelet Sabrik. Oh, Alana Kirshon. Yeah, exactly. And I think that was a really cool speaker, just because it was very interactive, and it was kind of something more tangible that you can know, like books, and seeing how, like, what gets lost in translation, or how important it is to find the right words, but also find, what comes out of all of these words together, and how is the story changed when you translate something. And yeah, so and another thing, like, when you get a speaker like that who really makes an impact on you, one of the cool things that we did in Bronfman is we wrote thank you notes to all of these speakers. So I wrote Alana's thank you note, and I got a chance to do that because her lecture, her speaker, really, as a speaker, really stood out to me. And I got to express that to her even after she wasn't with us anymore.
Thank you. And I think something that's actually really interesting, and what I love about you mentioning the thank yous to speakers, is that our speakers some of them are very political, and some of them are very, artistic, and some of them are culture makers, and some of them are spiritual leaders, and our fellows gravitate towards different guest speakers, and just as the speakers themselves are a wide range, our fellows have different affinities and different interests. So it's kind of like fun that, Miriam, you gave one type of example and Josh gave a very different type. So moving on to the next slide, One more thing that's worth mentioning is the way that art and culture is integrated into the program. And we do that in a few ways. We have some visiting artists that participate in some of our seminars, and fellows get a chance to do some hands-on art making of different kinds. Sometimes it's visual art, sometimes it's music or movement oriented. And the idea here is not that any of you need to become experts in artistic skills. Rather, it's really a chance to kind of use a different modality, a different set of language almost by engaging with art as a practice, as a community, and to do that in a creative way. Moving on to the next slide, we also, talked a little bit already about our joint seminar between our Israeli and our American fellows. We do have 20 Israeli fellows every year, and one of our visions as a program is the idea that the two largest centers of Jewish life are in North America and in Israel, and it's really important that there's a shared context and exploration together. And we really try to build a space for difficult and heartfelt conversations, and getting to know one another in different ways. So that's a little taste of the joint seminar between the Israelis and the Americans. We're happy to answer some questions about that as well. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit about safety and security. We are a program that has worked really hard to hone a model for creating a secure and safe program, and that is not only about physical safety, it's also about having a culture that doesn't tolerate bullying, having a culture that is a space for no harassment. It's also about health and safety and well-being, but in particular, especially this year, we do have a range of safety and security experts that we turn to, including some experts in the Israeli government when we are working on our Israel plans. And we are very responsive when we are on the ground in Israel in a typical summer to advice that we receive daily from the Israeli government based on our itinerary. And we have never hesitated to adjust our itinerary as needed. And in fact, some fellowship years in Israel, when there were other conflict times, we've positioned the group in regions of the country that are quiet or safer, when that has been an option that needed to be activated. Or, as I noted, we did not travel to Israel when there were other times that we couldn't. So on the next slide, well, I'll stop for one more minute, and I would love to just invite Miriam, Josh, and Ariel each to say a little bit more about something that really stands out that we haven't covered yet. So, for example, perhaps Shabbat and the way that Shabbat feels on Bronfman, perhaps a little bit more about exploring, just in the sense of like getting to be in New York City, getting to be in Israel, like some of the exploration that happens, or anything that you think has been missed. And then we will say a few things about application process and then open for questions. So Ariel, I'm going to turn it to you, since I know we moved through a few things and missed a few things along the way too.
Yeah, sounds great. I want to make sure that we get, or that you all hear a little bit about some of the spaces that the fellows co-created. So you heard a little bit about the matzo ball, which was I think a really fun culminating event. But there was also a talent show and a really moving Tisha B'Av observance. So observance of a holiday that I myself hadn't observed for many years, commemorating the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And the fellows really took it upon themselves to create that. And it was a combination of singing and poetry, and really sort of an example of everybody coming together. Shabbat was another one of those examples. And I want to highlight that we were in Jerusalem, we were also in New York, we were in different places where there was a really wide range of options for fellows to find an experience on Shabbat that felt maybe not perfectly comfortable, but at least meaningful and interesting. And I think the Shabbat visits were also a site of really productive, important conversation that I was really grateful to witness.
Josh, you want to jump in with anything to add at this moment?
Yeah, I will jump in about Shabbat and then some other stuff. Shabbat was cool in that we were given the opportunity and the freedom to go to a host of different synagogues in the area from the Chavah, the location that we were staying at. So you had groups going to the traditional Orthodox synagogues, and you had groups going to Israeli Reform synagogues, and you had groups going to something in between. And I remember some tough conversations after, and I think actually some of them were between Miriam and I about what those synagogues looked like and how they made members of the community feel, and how I might feel different than Miriam, might feel in certain synagogues in those spaces. So I think there's something special about experiencing Shabbat and Jewish life in the cohort, but then also experiencing it like an Israeli out in the world, in a Jewish country, in a Jewish culture, and that produced a host of really productive and challenging conversations. The other thing I want to talk about, and Mary mentioned it briefly earlier, was like the late night staying up. We did a lot of it, and it's a key part of building the community on Roshman. So the programming would end at 10:30, and then we'd stay up and we'd talk and we connect and we talk about our lives and our families and as we spent more time with each other, our stresses and our insecurities, and we'd also continue some of the tough conversations in the day. I remember once at 3 a.m. discussing the intricacies of the book of Samuel and how we can address the Amalekite nation and if the Amalekite nation still exists today. And crazy conversations. One day we visited East Jerusalem and met with Palestinians, and those conversations might have lasted till 2 or 3 or 4 a.m. And I think those were some of the most productive times because you're tired and you also really, really want to be there because you could be asleep, right? That's your choice. But everybody that's awake and everybody that's, of course we also sleep. We do get a lot of sleep, but there's something really special about spending the time without the staff there and really getting to dive deep into those topics without time constraints.
I can briefly say a couple other things. First of all, I definitely took the approach of, sleep when you're at home. And that made definitely I don't know how I would change that decision upon reflection, but like I made it through and it was really meaningful. And, those late nights were really, really fun. And but again, there was no judgment when you had to call it a night. I'll say earlier when we were talking about, taking opportunities or like seeing how opportunities with different speakers changed, our perspectives. I think something that the approach I really took into the summer was to try it out. And I found that, and not even with the formalized things we did, but in our interactions. And so I did go to a lot of different synagogues and I experienced a lot of different services, and ones that I felt connected to, ones that I really didn't feel connected to. But also there were suggestions by fellows. Like I remember one time it was like me, Josh led it with like a couple other people, and we were at this retreat center and we like went out into the darkness and like screamed the Shema as loud as we could. And like we were laughing during it, but like we got the words out. And like that's the kind of thing I was like, yeah, okay, let's see what happens, or going to a certain synagogue. Sometimes it would be 5 minutes before we had to leave when I decided what synagogue I was going to go to. Or there were just practices that I would never have done alone at home, but I felt really connected to trying out when I was surrounded by people who also wanted to try it out, but also knew what they were doing, and it's something that they do every day. And so there was this, back and forth between bringing your own practices and experiencing others and feeling open enough to try them out and know that you're not married to it. You don't have to start doing that for the rest of your life. And I'll share one other little experience I had in I think it was our first Shabbat. We were at a retreat center and we held our own service. And my practice is to wear a tallis during services. And it's not the practice of a lot of people in our group, but and I forgot my tallis at home, but someone who brought their tallis and wasn't gonna wear it allowed me to wear her tallis, and that felt really special because one, I got to connect with my practice of Judaism, but I got to do it through a vessel that means something to someone else. And I think I just found a lot of different experiences like this over the summer of, taking advantage of opportunities that I just wouldn't have at home. And when I think back to the summer, I'm really grateful I did that. And I'm really grateful for the diverse experiences that I got.
Okay, thank you. Those were all great. So very briefly, we'll say a few things about the application, and then if you have questions, you can start to get your questions ready, and we will open for questions. So right now, the application is live, and it's important to note that you are required to provide 2 letters of recommendation. At least one of those letters needs to be from someone that knows you in a classroom setting, a teacher that has taught you in an academic classroom environment, as well as your transcript from your school. And the application on our website, you can access a PDF of the application if you'd like to see all the questions, even before you move through the whole application online. We will receive applications as of December 4th, and then there's a few more days after that for those letters of rec to be completed. And then we have several readers read every application in its first round. And we try our best. We really, really value the time that you're putting into this process, and we do the best we can to make sure that we're giving every application a very close look. And then we narrow the population of applicants down to usually around 60, sometimes 70 people for interviews. Again, depends on the year. The application numbers are anywhere typically from about 150 to 300, depending on the year. But our interviews are for around 60 or 70 individuals. This year, we're actually finally, after the hiatus of COVID, we are returning to doing in-person interviews. And so you would be given an assigned location. We do have financial aid available for anyone who has to travel to their location. We try and assign locations based on region. And the interviews are really fun and a special experience. Additionally, you also will get to be part of a group workshop that's virtual, that's run by some of our young alumni, and it also gives you a taste of and a chance to meet some of the other finalists. And we will notify everyone who was interviewed by early March if they have been selected as one of the 26 fellows. So my most important tip, and I really truly mean this, is to share in your own voice and be yourself in these applications. We don't mind if it seems like, how could somebody be really into anime and also into Hasidic thought and also into whatever. It's okay if you're all over the map in the sense of what your passions are, but what matters is getting a feel for your passions and how you think and who you are. So it's not as important. Maybe sometimes people say for colleges, like, curate and kind of narrow what you're sharing about yourself. But in our case, we really want to get as much dimensionality about you as we can by reading the application. So don't hesitate to share yourselves in whatever way you can. So now we're on to questions, and you're very welcome. If you feel comfortable, you could raise hand, and we'll call on folks and you can unmute, or you again are very welcome to put something into the chat. You can also send a question directly to me or to Erica, and we'll try and synthesize questions if you don't want it to be shown to the whole crew. And your question can be for anyone on here or just a general question, and we'll do our best to answer it. Jonah, go for it.
Okay. Hi. My name's Jonah. You mentioned that there are 26 fellows in the American program. How many are in the Israeli program?
That's a good question and an easy one. 20. So there are 20 Israelis and 26 North Americans. And honestly, don't ask me why, because it precedes when I started working for Bronfman. But one story that I was told, which may or may not be true, is that it has something to do with how many seats in a bus and some vision of why they had random differences in the numbers. Okay, Madison.
Hi, I think Josh or Miriam, one of you mentioned meeting with Palestinian people in East Jerusalem. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about that and yeah, just share about your experience.
I mentioned it, so I guess I will speak to it. It was it was one of the more difficult days on the program, and in preparation for it, we met with multiple scholars, I think multiple people who explained to us the differences between, differences in Palestinian residency permits, and trying to understand difference between a Palestinian or an Israeli Arab with Israeli citizenship versus somebody living in East Jerusalem versus somebody living in the West Bank or Gaza. So we spent a lot of time trying to understand the historical and current geopolitical context of the people we were going to meet with, and of different types of Palestinians in the region. And then we went to a hotel with security. We had a security detail. Went to a hotel in East Jerusalem, and we met with multiple people. Two that stick out to me were, one was named Suma Kawazmi, I think her name was, and she was one of the founders of the Save Sheikh Jarrah movement, which was a big thing about, I think, 2 years ago, 2021, right around the last flare up with Hamas in Gaza. And I saw it over TikTok in the time, and we walked through this neighborhood in East Jerusalem that was kind of a debate: who should live there? Should it be Palestinians? Should it be Israeli Jews? Who has the right to that land? And she gave her perspective, and we debated her perspective later, and we talked about it. Later that day, we met with a man named Mahmoud Muna, who was a Palestinian Arab owner of a bookshop. And he talked about his perspective, which was incredibly nuanced. And he was almost an intellectual. He was incredibly academic, and it pushed, I think, most of us to new understandings of the conflict and of the history and of a future, whatever that may be. But that was the night, I think, where that was the most difficult for me. I grew up in a certain background with certain beliefs, and that was the day that challenged those beliefs. I don't think I necessarily changed them, but I definitely understand the conflict in a different way after that experience in East Jerusalem.
Okay. Taylor.
So this is just a question for Miriam or Josh. I was just wondering, with incorporating like current events into the program, do you ever think there was like a discussion or a lesson on a topic that you never really thought you would be discussing at Bronfman, or just anything that like really, really surprised you?
I'm trying to think. This is gonna leave me, another wave of reflection. I think there were things about Judaism I never knew existed that suddenly became a common, like, in our vocabulary of the summer. Like, I definitely was not using halakha colloquially, but suddenly I found myself halakha, Jewish law, like learning about what that is, and how it's important in a lot of the fellows' daily lives, which, like, just not something that I really ever thought about, at least not in those words. Yeah, and I think, and with regards to current events, something really interesting is discussing things that don't have to do with Judaism at all, but we still have these diverse perspectives from our varying geographic locations. So whether it be the West Coast, East Coast, and the South, or I'm from the Midwest, like, we all have these, broader, like, regional views or experiences, and then we also have our smaller communities. And I think in a combination of all of those, I just got to hear, straight from the source perspectives that I would never otherwise hear.
Thanks, Miriam. Jana. I don't know if I said your name right.
No, I'm actually Liza. It's my mom's computer. Anyway, I was wondering, you mentioned like specifically like Jewish texts. I was wondering like what texts would actually be like read, or like excerpts would be read and looked into, and also like what Jewish philosophical ideas, like a little bit like more specifically what we'd be looking at.
Ariel, do you want to grab that one?
Yeah, so it definitely will depend on the teachers and facilitators, but there are definitely some hits, some Bronfman hits, You can expect texts that come from the Talmud. You can expect texts that come from the Torah itself. You can also expect philosophical texts. We did a lot of Kafka this summer. And occasionally something that seems completely secular, quote from a movie. We looked at poetry a lot. So I think just broadening our idea of what a Jewish text is, I think everyone will be coming with whatever their starting point is for what is a Jewish text. And our hope at Bronfman is that no matter what your starting point is, you're going to get a really wide range.
Thanks. Hey, Gabby.
Hi, I'm Gabby. So I recall Joshua and Miriam saying how there was the opportunity to speak to different speakers with different talents and backgrounds. Were there any speakers that really inspired you the most or really spoke to you, and why?
Josh, do you want to take that sort of from a different angle? I think you shared for already a little about speakers that kind of widen something, or but maybe somebody who you feel like, yeah, sparked an inspiration for you.
I really enjoyed a speaker named Russ Roberts, who was one of the more controversial speakers. I'm not sure Miriam's opinions on him, but he was an economist at a think tank in Washington, D.C., a Stanford researcher. He wrote a book about Adam Smith, and he now runs a liberal arts college in Jerusalem. But he talked a lot about how like personal responsibility to do good and to impact the world. And like he said, Adam Smith, he basically took Adam Smith's economic principles and said that they kind of fit into Tikkun Olam and Jewish values. Kind of inspired me. He also said, one of the things he said is, if you don't like a book, after, I don't know, 50, 100 pages, close the book and start another one. And I've been putting that into practice in my life, trying not to waste any time.
Can
I say quickly a little bit about Russ Roberts? I thought he was one of the most engaging speakers that we had. Whether or not I agree with that idea to close a book immediately after disagreeing with it, I thought that like his speaking with him definitely was one of the most engaging experiences, and he was interactive. They had snacks. Can you believe that was a real treat. But I know like that some people, that one was a good one because some people agreed with what he said. Some people thought it was simplistic, but I felt very strongly that like I heard what he said, because you'll find this with the different speakers, like they present in different ways, and some of them will be more engaging whether or not you agree with the content they're speaking, and you might agree with what they're saying, but they're doing it in a slower way, in a way that you're not used to receiving information in. So I thought that was interesting for that.
And while I have it open, I actually want to mention something that we haven't mentioned yet. Everybody has a notebook at Bronfman, and we journal a lot after each day. So I was, trying to think about what I took away from Russ Roberts' speech, and I opened my journal and I have pages and pages and pages about it. So part of it's also, debating, but then sitting by yourself or, in solitary and trying to figure out how does what I said differ from what I actually think, and having that personal moment to actually reflect is a big part of the program as well.
Thank you for mentioning that. Matthew.
Hi, thank you so much for offering this information session. I really appreciate it. I was just wondering if not speaking Hebrew poses a big barrier to like learning and interacting with the Israeli fellows.
The quick answer is it's not a barrier. And the slightly longer answer is that we've spent a lot of time developing an approach to creating a space where translation and speaking the language that's most comfortable for you is centered at the joint seminar. So there are other programs that bring Israelis and Americans together, and they have English as the shared language. We do something a little more complicated, which is we want it to be a bilingual space. And so we really lean into both staff serving as support for translation, but also really fellows and AMI team supporting each other for translation. And while it definitely takes longer to get through some of those conversations, the benefits of like deeper listening that is required and supporting each other to really make sure and check back that you understand what's being said is something that we have found really helps to cultivate an atmosphere of equity in that space. I would say a large portion of our American fellows don't have Hebrew skills where they would feel comfortable conversationally or even comfortable with Hebrew full stop. And all of the content, all of the learning that we do throughout the entire fellowship always has translations, but also if there's the original language available, we will include that. And that means if there's a thinker in German that one of our faculty are teaching, they will include the German, they will include the English. If it happens to be that it also has a Hebrew translation, sometimes they'll include that too. So yeah, thank you for asking that. I'm going to ask Maya next for what question you've got.
Hi, so this is also for Josh and Miriam. In what ways do you feel that you've grown or changed the most since the summer in Israel and in America?
I can go first. I don't know if there's, one big way that stands out to me. I think the biggest way that I've grown is that I now have, so much more access to information, and the friendships that I now have will continue to help me grow. I think that's a big part of it. And no matter where we all end up, we have each other to, like, these people who experience the same summer but differently, and a group of people who are just as intellectually curious and interested in conversation as I am. And I think one of the biggest ways that I've grown is to try to continue to take that, may as well try it approach when engaging with people, my age, or to just learn from others.
Yeah, I can answer that as well. I think the biggest way I've grown is in regards to my opinions. Certain things I came in unsure, and I know I'm now more unsure. Left me asking me more questions, and I think that's also a product of you talk so much and you talk so much, and more opinions are brought up and more perspectives, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know which perspective is right or wrong. Because two things, what I'm brought when you talk about complexity a lot, and we have this word nuance. I think Becky, you guys even put it on a shirt. Nuance, and every topic's nuanced, and so there's complexities. And after the summer, there's some things I didn't know which opinion was right and which side was right, and other things, particularly my approach to halakha, Jewish law. I said after the summer, now I agree. I believe this a lot more, and I think that's what it does. Some things you become more sure of, and other things less sure of.
Thank you. Very beautiful. So Jacob, we'll take your question and then we'll close this, but for those who still have their hands up, we're happy to stay on for a bit longer, but I know it's a school night for people, so go for it, Jacob.
Hi, thank you for calling on me. I want to shout out Josh Danziger. We do BBYO together here in Houston, and he's great. We've gone to some conventions in the past. I was glad to see him here. I had a question. How does, what steps does Bronfman take to inspire social activism, like the action behind what we're doing beyond the seminars or the speakers? Like, what steps does it take to propel us towards real social entrepreneurship and making applicable change?
I love that question. Wow. I'm going to say a few things, and I think one part has to do with the students that actually come into the fellowship already are people who are leading in various forms and doing things already. And so the fellowship tries to be a space where you get a space to reflect, to do some deeper learning, to build a stronger network and relationships that are meaningful to you, where you can think out loud and think in a messier way maybe than sometimes is even provided in spaces that are really focused, in a deep way on action or activity. There's sometimes the need for really active people to also step back and reflect a bit. So in the fellowship itself, one of the ways that we try and encourage action is giving fellows the chance, and this is something that Miriam and Josh will do more of in this coming 2 seminars, but giving them the chance to interact with alumni who are active in various fields, giving them the chance to talk to and hear from people who are helping shape and influence every sphere of society. We ask fellows in the second half of 12th grade to also undertake what we call a Maaseh project, and the Beyond Bronfman project, the Action project, is really a project that is aimed at taking something from the Bronfman experience and bringing it into a wider sphere. And the last thing I'll say is just, even right now, as we're working to help support our very diverse community in response to what's happening in Israel, both our Israeli alumni and our North American alumni, our staff have been available for one-on-one check-ins and mentorship and making connections, actively helping people find ways to do and speak up and be engaged in the issue in a way that's authentic to them. And this is a really broad and pluralistic space. So this is not a place that tells you what to think. It helps you to get your voice out there where you are active. So thank you for that question, Jacob. It was a good one. It made me think. And so with that, for anyone who needs to jump off, we really appreciate, again, you joining. It's very meaningful to us that you've chosen to take your time tonight and to hopefully apply to the fellowship and complete the application. We will stay on for a few minutes for those of you that are still on and want to ask a question. And one last thing is you will be receiving an email. I'm not even sure, maybe you already will have, if you've started your application, where we also provide information about other programs that are out there for young adults. Because for us, it's really important. All of you are people who have the potential and who already are shaping Jewish life and the Jewish future. And so in advance, I'm letting you know that having 26 fellows is simply not enough, that frankly, every person on this call has something to offer, and we want you to find many access points. And our hope is that Bronfman will be one of those access points for you. But regardless, we'd like to help support you to find what works for you as well. So with that, good evening, and we'll keep going for those that stay on. And Ellie, I see your hand is up, so happy to take your question. And there's a few others maybe that have some more questions too.
Hi, my name is Ely. Thank you so much for this information session. And I had a question about the application process. And when we're submitting recommendations, it says one of them has to be a teacher. And does this teacher have to be someone who can talk about our school academic abilities, or can it be a teacher that has taught us in an extracurricular Jewish learning class?
One teacher of your 2 letters does need to be somebody that knows you in a school setting. If it happens to be that they're a teacher in the school setting, but the kind of activity or class that you took with them was more extracurricularly oriented, that would be okay. But we do want to have a sense of you as a student in some senses. And what I mean by that is both how you interact in a classroom setting and also how you digest content and information and engage with that. And it can be any class, right? It could be math, it could be English, it could be whatever sort of feels right to you. But that is one of the ways that we get a little insight through your recommendations.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. I saw Jonah's question came up in the chat. Jonah, if you want to just say it out loud, feel free, and Josh can try and answer it for you.
So if either of you go to Jewish school, I think one of you mentioned that you did. How did the Bronfman Fellowship impact your Jewish education, like school year, throughout the school year so far? I mean, it's only been this summer, but like in the past 2 months. And also, how do you think your Jewish education, if you had one at school, affected your Bronfman educational experience?
I think I'm going to answer the second question first, how the Jewish school education impacted the Bronfman education. Bronfman, when we had these like Beit Midrash, like learning sessions, or the shiurim, the classes, we would often break up into what's known as chavruta, which is like partner pairs to learn a text together. And, often we would be asked to break up into a chavruta, to a pair with somebody who we knew had a different level of Jewish understanding or knowledge, or experience as us. So I've gone to a Jewish school my whole life. I can read Hebrew. I can understand a lot of the the Hebrew in its original text, and I'd be in a chavrut, in a pair with somebody reading a text who never had done so before, or didn't know how to read Hebrew. And that dichotomy was actually really interesting because I could look at a Hebrew word and I could say, this translation says this Hebrew word. I remember one was the word tolah, or tolea. And I said, here it says it means, sheet, but the way I learned in school is it means a fabric cloth. And, adding kind of a nuance from my prior understanding, which added a lot. But on the other hand, my partner, who had never read Hebrew before, could look at it on a much more macro scale and compare it to secular texts, to their prior understanding. So Jewish knowledge, Jewish background, going to Jewish school is absolutely not a prerequisite to being able to contribute a lot. If you have knowledge, it contributes. If you don't, you contribute with the other parts or aspects of your life. How has it changed my experience at Jewish school? Sometimes you go back to Jewish school and you think, this is not like Bronfman. People, the teachers are not as open necessarily as the Bronfman teachers are. And it makes you appreciate the experience you had. Bronfman's unique also, and I don't think we mentioned this. I don't think this has been mentioned yet, in that there are no grades. If you want, you don't have to participate in a conversation. In school, in my Jewish studies classes, if I don't participate in the conversation, I get a bad grade. If I question the traditional rabbinic understanding of a concept, my grade is at risk, right? And at Bronfman, that you can question as much as you want, you can challenge as much as you want. So that creates, I think the lack of grades creates a less stressful learning environment.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Gabby, you get to round us out for the final question of the
Awesome. So, how do you think or view your Jewish identity differently after this fellowship than maybe you did prior? And furthermore, how has this fellowship inspired you to make change in the Jewish community and in the world?
Let me think about that. Change in the world. Wow, it's a lot of pressure. No, just kidding. But I think the way that Bronfman has affected my Jewish identity is it's like reignited a flame to keep looking, and to continue to explore and to continue to engage in conversation with people who have practices unlike my own. I think I've found, so I come from a school that has very, very few Jews. It's just my neighborhood public school. And so Bronfman was a unique experience to get to engage with peers my age about Judaism. And so coming away from Bronfman, I reflected a lot on what it was like to listen to people with Jewish perspectives unlike my own, because if I know how I feel, then that's one perspective. And I think the way that I'm gonna take what I learned out with me into the world is when I find myself in Jewish spaces like my own synagogue where everyone grew up how I grew up, or when I go to college in a space where people are coming from all over. I'm going to, lean on my fellow fellows to help me figure out what I'm experiencing and help me continue to further discover what various Jewish communities look like. And just as a little, tidbit, like I hope that when I visit fellows or go to where they're from, they'll take me to their synagogues, whether or not it's how I practice. And I'm excited to experience how other people are growing up and to use those experiences to inform, my perspective of Judaism.
I guess I can also answer this one. How has my Jewish identity changed? I'm not sure. And I think that what Bronfman is, what's special about Bronfman is it's not like a one-off summer of experience. And I don't know if this has been mentioned yet either, right? But Bronfman is kind of a lifelong experience. So there, of course, we have the summer experience. Then there's we have a session in January and we have a separate session in April. But then fellows enter the alumni network, which I'm not part of yet. So I have limited knowledge about it. But they have every year there's a Shabbaton for alumni, for college alumni, and there are Zoom sessions. There's like 4 Zoom sessions in the next 3 weeks about the conflict in Israel right now, and trying to connect the Bronfman community and be stronger together. There's like a list, they call what you call lists. It's like a bulletin board. People post ideas and topics, and they have discussion boards, and it's like, so Bronfman's a lifelong learning experience, engaging. And one of our faculty members, his name was Evan, he's a professor at Columbia. He said that his most impactful experiences on Bronfman weren't actually in the fellowship year. They were in the years and years and years of engagement he's had after, seeing the same people, year after year at the Shabbatones, at the events, and engaging with them and seeing how their opinions change and how they change intellectually over time. So I'm not ready to say that Bronfman has changed me as a person yet, because I don't think it has. I think I practice the same type of Judaism that I think I did beforehand. It opened me up to a lot more. But I'm not to say that I'm not ready, that I'm not open to being changed. But I expect Bronfman to have an impact on my identity for years to come.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Thank you for mentioning the long-term model here. I think it would be a little bit scary in some ways if you were radically changed, if anyone was radically changed from the initial fellowship summer, but it's this opening process and connections and lifelong conversations that really can have a really deep impact. So with that, thank you all so much. It's already past midnight for me, so I'm definitely ready to go to bed. But it was really a pleasure to be with all of you, and we really appreciated your questions. Miriam, Josh, and Ariel, thank you so much. This was awesome to hear from you, and we look forward to being in touch. If you have any technical questions or other questions that you want to follow up on for the application, you can be in touch with our team. You can reach out to office@bronfman.org. And we also are offering right now access to having a one-on-one chat with an alum. If you're interested, if you haven't received email about that, you will receive a follow-up after tonight. And that's another resource if you would like to get some more personal information of any sort. So, okay, have a great evening. See y'all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.